Good afternoon, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 101, believe it or not. We've entered the 100s and we're going to continue going down the road. And we're joined by a very special guest. His name is Chase Oliver, and he's a 2024 Libertarian presidential candidate running for the office of President of the United States 2024 again. He recently was in a very important national televised debate with free and equal elections. We're going to talk about that some today. He was joined with fellow libertarian Lawrence Mapstead, Jasmine Sherman, also Claudia de la Cruz, Jill Stein. I believe there's 5 people in attendance. Originally, Cornel West was scheduled to be there, but I don't think he appeared. But again, we have a lot to discuss. This is Chase's first appearance on Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. And we just want to say welcome to the show, and we appreciate your acceptance of our invitation.
Hey, thank you for having me. And I'm sorry it took me till 101 episodes to get here, but we're glad to be here and glad you're at episode 101. And yeah, it was a great time at the Free and Equal Debates. And I look forward to speaking with you and having your viewers and listeners hear a little bit about our campaign. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited.
Well, Chase, a lot of that isn't your fault with the one-on-one reference, but I tell you, I really try to target the people I find, and I like to get interesting guests with great ideas and great dialogue. This is a very civil forum. We don't deal with like the argument, the clickbait type stuff. I mean, we do have interesting moments, that's for sure. But you just really appealed to me just for a lot of different reasons. We're going to get into that in a second. But I want to give just a slight add to the forum and say the Kiko's Freethinkers Forum is growing rapidly. We're exclusively on a YouTube base right now, video. And I just want to say thanks to everyone that supports the channel. We got our first donations a few weeks ago. We do not tell people to send us money. If you want to send us money, great. But we really just ask for a subscription for free to really support independent media and to also help the algorithm because we know that the channels are also being suppressed at a rapid rate right now, especially political content that goes against the mainstream narratives, which is very much what we do here at Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. We have a large international audience. 43% of our listeners are outside of the United States. And so this was always the point of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum was to make it an international community forum. But I want to start with Chase. Let's put the attention to Chase Oliver, very popular, I must say. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you won the Libertarian caucuses in Oklahoma and Iowa.
Yeah, so I won the Libertarian Party of Iowa caucus. That was a few weeks back. Negative 20-degree temperatures, but libertarians came out across the state, and we won 43% of that vote. And then just last night, we won the Libertarian Party primary in Oklahoma. There was myself and Jacob Hornberger on the ballot. We were the two that qualified to be on that primary ballot. It's the first time Oklahoma has ever had a Libertarian Party primary, so I was very proud to participate in that and help increase the visibility of libertarians in Oklahoma. And I'm proud to say that I won that race with just under 65. I think it was like 63% of the vote last time I checked last night. And it was a great race to run. I got to travel through the state, and really it just shows like when you get out there and you're being active as a candidate, you do get that support. We also were the top vote getter in the Libertarian Party of North Carolina's primary last night. Massachusetts, we're still getting that data. We probably won't have that data until the weekend. And then I was a write-in candidate in California. We only had, due to some miscommunication, only one candidate was actually on the ballot in California as a Libertarian candidate for president. And so I did the work of becoming the only certified write-in candidate. And we did a really big get out the vote. So I don't know if we're going to win that one because it's much easier just to select a name as opposed to writing one in. But I want to see how many people we did get out to the polls to write our name in California, doing that kind of get out the vote push. But it's been a really exciting Super Tuesday for libertarians, kind of the first time we've had a lot of these primaries and this process. And happy to say we're kind of leading the way there, and the momentum is definitely in our favor. We got the wind in our sails, and we want to keep pushing that until we get our party's nomination in May, and then right through to the November election, having as much impact on the 2024 election as possible, and hopefully getting lots of libertarian voters all across the country excited.
And that May reference, is that the 24th of May?
Yeah, it's Memorial Day weekend is when we do our national party convention. It's going to take place in Washington, D.C. And unlike the other candidates, the Republicans and the Democrats, their primaries bind their delegates. Our delegates are actually selected at state conventions, and then they go into our national convention unbound. They are not required to vote one way or the other. The primary is just merely a way to advise these delegates as to which way the wind's blowing in their state and possibly encourage them to vote one way or the other there. But it's a real actual like democracy in action happening on the floor there. So I encourage people who are political junkies of any party, if you want to see an actual convention, like there's floor, there's people being on the whip, whipping votes on the floor, and when one candidate falls out, like who's his support going to go to in the next round? Like it's very exciting stuff. It's not this prepackaged thing that you get from the Democrats and Republicans. So if you're interested in politics, both whether you're here in the United States or listening from abroad, check out the Libertarian Party of Convention. It will be live streamed. And you can always check out the Libertarian Party at lp.org. And if you like what you hear today from my platform, I encourage you to join the Libertarian Party. Become a member, become somebody who donates to the party so we are ready to go on day one. Not just the campaign, but the party's ready to go to help have a maximum impact on the election in 2024.
Well, I tell you, Chase, I'm not going to say that that stuff wasn't interesting because it is. But I want to go back to something before we, really talk about your campaign some. And let's get Chase Oliver's backstory because you're new to my audience. This is your first appearance. So can you give us like maybe a condensed version, 3 to 4 minutes, kind of like how you started in this political journey, or even go back to your upbringing and stuff?
Yeah. So I'm a 38-year-old born in Nashville, Tennessee, but I've lived in and around Atlanta for most of my life since I was like a 7-year-old. So I'm definitely a Georgia boy at heart. And I got started in politics way back when I was in high school because the war on terror began right as I was graduating and getting out of high school. And in particularly the war in Iraq, I saw how the CIA and other intelligence agencies cherry-picked data and intelligence to try to make a case that Iraq was like some sort of like scary, on the verge of nuclear weapons kind of thing. And we found out that those weapons of mass destruction simply didn't exist. And that's what got me on my road to being an anti-war voter, somebody who's a skeptic of the national security state and the intelligence agencies. And that propelled me into becoming a Democrat because I didn't know the Libertarian Party at the time. And George Bush was a Republican. And it was actually after Obama got elected in 2008. He basically broke all of the anti-war promises he made to the anti-war movement. And I think that's kind of when we went our separate ways. Me, certainly from the Democratic Party. And in 2010, I found the Libertarian Party. They were tabling at a festival. And lo and behold, I just walked into the tent. Literally, their candidate for governor, John Mons, he's an awesome guy. He saw me looking at the tent and he waved me over. He's like, I see you looking at us. Come on over here. And he connected my anti-war views. When he found out I was anti-war, he was like, welcome home. This is where you belong. Let's connect your anti-war views with all the other views of the Libertarian Party. And you can realize that this is where your political home should have been all along. And I was proud to take that journey. And I want to make that journey for millions of other Americans. 60 over 60% say they're tired of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So we want to bring them back here. But my background is actually in service work. So I got started in the restaurant industry. I got started as a dishwasher. And by the time I left the industry, I was helping to advise new entrepreneurs how to open restaurants. I had worked at every facet of the industry. And so I kind of had that knowledge. And then I moved into the logistics industry. For years, I worked for a company that helped move containers from one side of the world to the other, gave me even further newfound appreciation for free markets and how commerce can make for peace amongst communities around the world. And then I did some other work during COVID, some online remote work as I was running for Senate, which I also did in 2022. But now here I am running for president. I'm somebody who is, I've worked at every level. I've been the guy who's cleaning the crud off your dishes, or I'm also the guy who's helping to make sure that the products get to the shelves in your local Walmart via trade and logistics. So I've worked both at blue collar and white collar existence. And being 38, I think it's important to have a younger voice in this election. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both 80 or around 80, and I'm half their age or less. And I think that's really important that my generation has a voice in this election because it's really high time that millennials and now Gen Z rise and take control of our elections.
No, I think that's a very important point with the age, and it's not being ageist. I definitely think we need fresher people in, and not just the age purpose, but also the ideas. We need fresh ideas and fresher faces, younger
Mhm.
faces in Congress, president level, all different levels, local level. I think that's a big part of this problem. That's why we need term limits, in my opinion, so we can get rid of all the nepotism and all the just the continuation of all the incentive to just make money while you're in office and not
Mhm.
really help the people out. But something you said there about your anti-war stances that started back in '01 with the war on terror, the George Bush. It seems like no one talks about that era anymore. And which is funny. It's like, oh gosh, let's fast forward and talk about the other monsters that we've had since then. But that seems like a long time ago. I know at the time I was a Democrat, and so we have a lot of parallels in our own personal journeys politically. I know after Obama's first term, I supported him, but after that, I dropped off completely once he said he wasn't going to close Guantanamo. That was kind of a red flag for me. And he just continued all the war endeavors that we've continued to fund for years. And I've been pretty much an independent for the last 10 years, I'd say solidly an independent. And so I'm really excited to talk to libertarians. But honestly, I don't even know if I would have talked to a libertarian 4 years ago. I've had to kind of open myself up because I thought I knew what libertarian was, what libertarianism was. Could you tell my audience, for someone who was like myself 4 years ago, who probably wouldn't have talked to a libertarian, didn't know what it was, what does libertarianism mean to Chase Oliver?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad you're taking the journey, and it is a journey for people. But broadly speaking, a libertarian is somebody who believes that the government should not be involving itself in your life or your affairs, so long as you're not harming the liberty or inhibiting the liberty of another person. And so, with that, if you're not committing force, fraud, coercion, theft, or violence, as far as government's concerned, your life is your life, your body is your body, your business is your business, and your property is your property, and your family is your family. It's not the government's to decide or to control, and that any interaction with government, our position at most should be voluntary, right? And we run this, the scope of limited government across the spectrum from constitutionalists all the way to anarchists. I mean, we have a very large umbrella within the Libertarian Party, but mainly we are against the use of force against other people for the purposes of political or social change. We believe in the power of free markets, the power of free expression, free speech, and free ideas, and the ability for people to govern themselves so long as they do so in peace. And with that, we've supported positions. We're over 50 years into our party founding. Uh, and for long, we've always been an anti-war, anti-interventionist party. We've been a party that opposes taxation at every level because we do view it as taking prosperity out of your pocket and then having central planners and government try to manipulate and decide what is and what isn't a good thing to spend money on. And then even things like ending the drug war completely. We view this as a program that has allowed government to throw thousands and thousands upon thousands, now millions of people in jail for the crime of ingesting something or imbibing in something that is in their own body and not harming anybody else. We believe the same thing across the line for any consensual behavior. Things like sex work, that should not be illegal. I always joke that prostitution is illegal, but if you throw a camera on it, then it's a movie and it's okay. That seems to be the weird loophole that we've made for ourselves. But really across the board, anything where there is an interaction with your life, as long as you're doing it in peace, government shouldn't be a part of that equation. That involves itself within free trade and free markets between individuals. And so with that, we believe there would be more peace and prosperity if we could just let ourselves govern ourselves and decentralize that power away from Washington, D.C., or even your own state house and move that back to your local community or to yourself, which is the most local form of government.
Thank you for that explanation to kind of like your view of libertarianism, just like a general view. Based on what you said, though, I was curious. You're right, there is quite a range of ideologies. And this forum, at this point, honestly, I get so many people on, and these labels to me are almost pointless at some time and period. And I think they're used to really weaponize against people instead of bring them together potentially, or at least work together across, different ideologies. I don't see the point of this. The name calling is really something that bothers me a lot, and I try to avoid it unless it's strategic, and like a good strategy as far as like, hey, we got to highlight this negative and maybe, turn it into something else, But I think there's a lot of that going on, especially with third parties and independents, and we really need to find ways to establish a common ground. I
Yeah.
think to be even taken seriously outside of the duopoly right now. But I want to get to what type of a libertarian are you specifically? Where would you differ from other libertarians? Because I've noticed this that I used to think that libertarians had a pretty consistent basis, but there are differences in views between different libertarians. What would differentiate you from other libertarians, for instance?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely common principles. There are certainly die-hard principles that are very unwavering with the Libertarian Party, but I think it's how we address, or how we express those principles that might be the dividing area. So I'm a minarchist. I believe that there is a need for a state, but it was a minimal state, like that would only have a military to protect us from invasion and laws and courts and law enforcement to protect us from violations of liberty at home between individual citizens. And so, like, I believe in the bare minimum state. But there's dividing lines. Like I said, there's anarchists who fundamentally don't believe in the concept of a state. And then there's all the way to constitutionalists, people who believe we just need to get right back into line with the Constitution, and that's all we need. And with that umbrella, I'm a presidential candidate. It is my job actually to represent the entirety of the party. And so I'm not a candidate who says, well, like as a minarchist, it will only be my way in the Libertarian Party. I recognize there's a broad, diverse set of views, and that I'm willing to represent all of those broadly. But specifically, I look to solutions that reduce the size of the state, that tear it down brick by brick. But I don't think we're going to get to a point, even if I could tear it down as fast as possible, get to a point where someone like a minarchist like me is actually going to be in conflict with an anarchist, because we're not going to get to my utopia in 4 or 8 years. And so, like, for me, why am I going to make an opponent of somebody who believes in even less of a state than I do if we're never even going to get to my ideal state? Even if I work as hard as I can, if I have the wind at my back and friends in Congress and all these things, if everything like lined up perfectly, I still don't think we could get there in 8 years because just the process would take so long. But that being said, I want to represent, broadly speaking, those who are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. So many Americans, over 60% have said they're willing to vote for somebody who's not Donald Trump or Joe Biden if they can be inspired to vote for somebody. And the Libertarian Party is in the best chance to have ballot access in all these states, even more than, say, RFK. And so if you're somebody who wants to speak out against the establishment, please look into this campaign. And I guarantee you're going to find something, at least a few things you're going to like if you're anti-establishment and you've been opposed to things like the war machine, the abuse of immigrants, the criminal justice system being thrown out of whack, the war on drugs, and the systemic racism that comes from it in our courts. The ability to get started and work and have a level playing field between small businesses and big businesses. Like, there are so many areas where people can find commonality and agreement with this campaign that I hope we awake and inspire millions of people to reject the two-party system and to get out and make their voices heard, not just merely as a protest vote, but voting for something. And that's how I think we can build the foundation of the Libertarian Party to be majorly effective in the long run, particularly as those Gen Z voters rise and become the largest voting bloc in 15 years. We want to hear from them. We want to make solutions that resonate with them and grow our party from the grassroots that way. And that's what I'm trying to do with this campaign. And I hope your listeners across the independent spectrum can open up our website at votechaseoliver.com with a fresh set of eyes, look at our platform, look at the work that we're doing, and seeing how hard we're churning through the campaign to challenge the two-party system. And if that's something you want to support, we would welcome it, whether you're a libertarian or not. But again, I also welcome you to join the Libertarian Party.
Awesome. Now, my listeners, be patient with me now, okay? Because I know that I have different types of listeners and viewers, and some want to go when I interview, especially if people run for public office, they just want, okay, I don't want to hear all that other stuff, Kiko. I want to hear what their platform is about and stuff. But I promise we're going to get to that like hardcore. But I got some important questions leading up to this. You guys know how I do it, but now 100 episodes in, you guys should know what to expect on Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. But I wanted to ask you, Are you part of the Mises Caucus?
I'm not. I'm actually not part of like any caucus, and I mean, I would join any caucus and participate. I've done voter forums with Mises Caucus members, and I've, of course, run into their caucus members across the country and welcome their feedback and welcome them to join the campaign if they'd like. But I'm not trying to seek to be any one caucus member's candidate. I am running to be the Libertarian Party candidate, of which the Mises Caucus is a part, as is the Classical Liberal Caucus, the Radical Caucus. We have a bunch of other caucuses. I'm part of the Waffle House Caucus, for instance, Waffle House enthusiasts who are also libertarians. So I want to represent the broad spectrum of our party. But no, I'm not a member of the Mises Caucus.
The reason why I ask is because I'm trying to figure out, and I've had Mike Termata on a couple of times,
Hmm.
who is part of the Mises Caucus. And I've had Spike Cohen on 3 times. Spike is he describes himself as an anarcho-capitalist.
Yes.
It sounds like you're neither one of those. You're not a Mises Caucus member or you're not an ANCAP.
Well, a lot of the Mises Caucus members are anarcho-capitalists. I'm sure there are also anarcho-capitalists who are not.
Mhm.
In fact, there's anarcho-capitalists who are not a member of the Libertarian Party, or even a member. There are people out there who are so anarchist that they oppose the idea of voting altogether. They're agorists, right? But no, I'm a minarchist, and I'm somebody who, of course, respects the works of Mises and understands that Austrian economics are a big part of the libertarian sphere and spectrum. And I've certainly read like Mises on liberalism, and I've read Hayek and some of the other great thinkers out of the movement of libertarian economics, of which the Mises Caucus is named after. But I'm not a member because I just never really tried to join caucuses a whole bunch. I was a member of a caucus a while back, and it just wasn't really my jam. I prefer just to try to be somebody who is independent of that and who would like to represent all caucuses. So I don't really pay dues to any membership anymore. I mean, I would join the Mises Caucus, if they would have me, I suppose. But honestly, to me, I find it better just to run as a libertarian. But as far as anarcho-capitalists, I have lots of friends who are ANCAPs. As a minarchist, like I said, I agree with the minimal state. They say no state. We can have all kinds of late night drunken discussions, over a few beers or some scotch discussing that issue. But in reality, I think we need to be arm in arm as we fight to tear the state down, because it's so large and tyrannical right now that if we're not joining together arm in arm, we're going to be in real trouble. And so long as you can respect the inherent liberty of all people and commit yourself to a positive kind of growth building movement, that's the kind of campaign I'm trying to run, because that's the kind of campaign that resonates with people, that respects each and every person's right to live as they see fit, even if it's not the way I live my life. Like, I have to understand that there are going to be people who live a different way than me, have a different faith than me, have a different, sexual orientation than me, that have a different, gender than me, that have a different family structure than me. Like, there's all kinds of different lifestyles and livelihoods that exist within our great American quilt. And I think that's something that, as a libertarian, I think makes America actually one of the exceptional nations around the world. And it's one of the things that makes me proud to be a libertarian, because I defend those ideas. And so, yeah, whether I roll with a caucus or not, I respect everybody, whether they do or not.
No, thanks for that answer because it really clarifies. I wouldn't even call it a divide, but just simply it helps me understand better like the different thought processes that go into these organizations. And it make because this is still relatively new to me, even though I've interviewed people who are liberty minded and people who associate with libertarianism. But no, that makes a lot more sense to me. So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, your performance was unbelievable at the free and equal elections debate. It really was. I'm not even saying that because you're on the show. It really stood out, in my opinion. And I'm not going to say winners or anything like that, but I'm just going to say that you stood out big time, considering that that was kind of like the first time I got a sight into like who Chase Oliver was and what he stood for. We had Christina Tobin on the show some months ago, who is the founder of Free and Equal. So shout out to Christina for
Hmm.
putting on such a great event. That was a wonderful event. And I advise my listeners to go watch that Free and Equal elections debate. It's on their YouTube channel. It was a broadcast through several channels, C-SPAN and Rumble and a bunch of other different streaming services. So go check that out. Chase is on there. And again, there were 4 other people in attendance. Jill Stein is actually going to be on the show later this month. You all have already seen Jasmine a few times. Her VP candidate is actually going to be on tomorrow. So I try to bring in as many people as I can. A lot of people are receptive, some people aren't, and that's totally fine. But Chase was very receptive to coming on to the show. And having said that, I want to get into kind of his positions. One thing that stood out in that debate was you said that you were about abolishing private prisons. And I was saying to myself, every time I hear libertarians talk, they're always talking about private, 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 private. And my antenna kind of went up a little bit when you said that. Is that a common view for a libertarian to be in favor of abolishing prisons, for instance?
Well, as a like I said, as a minarchist who believes in a state existing, that's one of the few legitimate functions I believe a state needs to have is law enforcement courts and the ability to adjudicate and to punish those who violate the liberty of other people via sentencing, via a jury of peers and a judge and a jury and all those things. I believe in all that, and so with that. I want to oppose privatization of that because when you have a privatization of prisons, you're creating a profit motive to fill beds. Because any private business is ultimately motivated by profit. And while that's great for lots of other industries, for the purposes of throwing people in jail and separating them from society, I don't find that to be the best use of the private market. And in fact, you can see lots of abuses of, where you see these private prison companies actually lobby state houses and our Congress to make penalties stiffer, to add new crimes to the books. And this is for the purposes of filling those beds and not necessarily reducing crime in our communities or making our communities any safer. And actually, I think it further traumatizes many people who suffer from being thrown into to our prison system. And many times that's people who lack the means, people who are without economic means to pay for a great defense attorney and who often have to plead down to things. And this also disproportionately affects minority communities. And this is because policing disproportionately affects minority communities. And so I would look to try to adjudicate that and fix that stuff by removing that privatization model. Again, like you said, as a libertarian, I support the free market and privatization of just nearly about everything. But when it comes to criminal justice, I do support having some sort of public model there. And that would include public prisons that are accountable to the will of the voter and they're accountable to some sort of oversight to make sure that we're not cutting every corner we can, doing everything we can to lobby to have more people thrown into our prisons. I would actually like to see less prisons built. I think in a libertarian world, we would have less need for private prisons because we'd have less need for prisons overall, because we would vastly cut down on this over-criminalization of consensual, peaceful, victimless behavior that we see so much across the board. And in fact, Joe Biden, who's the current president of the United States, was the champion of the 94 crime bill that put a lot of this stuff into action. Things like mandatory minimums, 3 strikes, you're out, stiffer penalties that have been used against, again, the communities without economic means to defend themselves and disproportionately communities of color. And I would like to see a reverse course on that. And I've been a criminal justice advocate for a long time. And this is one of those things that maybe does challenge the notion of some libertarians that all privatization is a good thing. And I welcome to have that conversation with libertarians who maybe feel differently about this and giving them the empirical evidence as well as just the anecdotal evidence of speaking to people who have been affected by the private prison system across the country.
No, it makes total sense. Just from my standpoint, and maybe I've been a little biased here. For me, it will only make sense based on just the whole idea about libertarianism. You're being consistent with all the libertarians that I know. They're very strict when it comes to criminal justice. Like they're very serious when they talk about criminal justice reform. I think that was one of the first initial things that attracted me to when libertarians started talking. I think Spike Cohen was kind of the first one that caught my eye. And I was like, is that what libertarians think across the board? Like they don't want this drug war to continue. They don't want the wars around the world to continue. And I was like, damn, I guess this is like a common thing for libertarians. And so that is very promising. And having said that, I think it will only make sense to um, not want to have private prisons, even if you like privatization in other enterprises. I don't see the point of having um, a prison industrial complex, especially when there's a profit motive with human beings, because that goes against the whole anti-war, which is a humanitarian stance as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if people are anti-war, that means I think they want to, that cooperation,
Mhm.
coordination. We don't need missiles to talk to people. We don't
Oh
have to
yeah.
threaten people by missiles. We can simply use our mouths and our brains.
Well, one more thing about the prison industrial complex is we also have to recognize the 13th Amendment issue here is the fact that the 13th Amendment outlawed private slavery, but it actually said that if you're being punished, you can still be forced to work. And now we see prison labor being used so much across the country. And this is a result of the private prison system. They're using individuals to get free labor to make money for them. And this is clearly wrong. This is legalized slavery that's being done in the private marketplace. And then I would outlaw all prison labor that isn't paid a fair wage. I think that's ridiculous. And if you look at there's some places like there's the governor's mansion in the state of Louisiana. If you want to know who's vacuuming the carpets, scrubbing the toilets, cleaning the clothes, doing all that work for the governor, that's all prison labor. It's all prisoners. And to me, it's just completely immoral. And if I were the governor of Louisiana, I would absolutely say I don't support that. And I'll pay for my own cleaning service to do this because just morally, it's not right to be forcing people to be scrubbing my toilets as a matter of being a prisoner. And so we do have to remember that 13th Amendment issue there that slavery has not been eliminated completely by our government, just private slavery. We need to now do away with the public slavery that is prison labor that's unpaid or underpaid. I made mention at the free and equal debates about a man who he sent $18 to go fight or to help the people of Gaza, and that was over 100 hours worth of labor for him because he was being paid just such a shoddy wage. It was like, I think under a cent an hour or something like that. It was ridiculous, and so we need to end this practice as well.
No, that's wonderful. Like I said, I think you had quite a few standout moments in that debate in particular. But I just like that we can get these types of ideas onto the forum. I think my audience really, and this is to my people who are in different persuasions. I know I have a lot of followers. I got Trump supporters, Biden supporters. I got people who are socialists. They consider themselves communists. I have people who are libertarians. I have really a wide range of people, and some people are just apolitical across the board. But I just urge you all just to take these ideas in and to really consider what each candidate is saying, and not just judge, quickly. I know I've had to go through this process myself, and I'm glad that I've been able to kind of be roped back in to where I can have the ability to talk to different types of people because, like I said, 4 years ago, this probably would not have happened because not because we don't have a lot in common, but simply because I had that ideological barrier, that mental barrier in my mind of what I thought a libertarian was or what I thought a Green Party person was or anybody for that matter. But before we get more into your views and your platform, I wanted to ask you, since I have you, what's your view on Javier Milei? Because I have views about Javier Milei, but I just want to get yours on him, if you have any
Yeah.
at all.
So cautiously optimistic. Like I think it's great that we have a libertarian economist who has been elected. That's great. Libertarian economics are great, but we also do have to remember that there's other things with regards to libertarianism and freedom there, and that includes free expression, free speech, bodily autonomy, and so we have to be willing as libertarians. Like as excited as we are for Javier Milei, and I am, I think it's a great thing. But I'm also, again, cautiously optimistic because if he starts sliding backwards into statism or authoritarianism, it's we libertarians who have to be the loudest in sounding the call against that stuff. We have to be our own harshest critic there because this is the first time we have a self-professed libertarian head of state, an anarcho-capitalist head of state. And so if they backslide away from that, we need to be sounding loud and clear and being his loudest critic. But I believe, I'm excited for it. I was at LibertyCon a few weeks ago in DC, a giant symposium. It's put together by Students for Liberty with young people from all over the world. And I met some libertarian Argentines. They were excited. They were so ready to see like free markets come to their country to help fight these things. But I'm reminded that libertarian economics alone will not get it. a friend of mine who is a libertarian economist who said, we have to be willing to stand back and criticize if he goes towards authoritarianism in other areas. He said, Pinochet read Hayek as well, but he also killed a lot of people, and he was a brutal dictator. And so libertarian economics alone will not be it. But I want to see exactly how we can transform Argentina into a more free market, free, liberty-centered country. I look forward to it. And like I said, I'm excited, but always have cautious optimism when somebody who gets elected head of state self-professes themselves as a libertarian, because it requires us to be our own harshest critic sometimes. But mentioning, speaking across the political spectrum, I will say this: if you're a Republican or a Democrat listening to me and you like my ideas, feel free to steal them and give them to your local Republican or Democrat politician. And hopefully those things get adopted, because that's another win for libertarians if we sway that Overton window of allowable political opinion to be moved more in a liberty-centered direction. And so just because you're not a libertarian today doesn't mean you have to be my enemy. It means that if you like my ideas, you can go help them be adopted amongst your own communities, and maybe we become a more libertarian community that way. But yeah, absolutely. Let's see how many more libertarians heads of state we can get elected. Maybe we can elect one in 2024. Who knows? Let's not wait until we have 150% inflation and 1 in 4 people being in abject poverty before we give libertarianism a try. If we've tried, something different for 50 or 60 years and it's not working, hint, hint, maybe it's time to try libertarianism.
That's funny. What do you think, you alluded to it some there, as far as coalition building is concerned, or just appeal to the average voter, which could be anybody? What do you feel you have an advantage as far as being able to reach across different ideological blocks? So what are a couple of issues where you think you have maybe an advantage, or you have a better nuanced understanding of something versus other people running across the field?
Well, I think a lot of that comes from my background of being like right in the workforce. I'm not an academic, I'm not a lawyer or somebody who's, spent 20 years going to school. No, I got right into the real world and right into the real working world. I think that informs me, but also I've always been somebody who has enjoyed conversation. Maybe this is because I'm dyslexic and, I prefer listening and speaking to people. But I've come across thousands and thousands of disaffected voters, and I'm hearing from them and trying to speak a message that resonates to them. And I think being so practiced, I've traveled more than I think probably any independent candidate that's running right now. I've been to 44 states on my way to all 50. I've visited many of these states multiple times. And because of this, I've had the opportunity to just hear from regular folks in airport bars and waiting rooms and restaurants and just all across the country, and festivals and county fairs. And with that, I am able to communicate our values in a way that really resonates with them the most, because I'm getting that feedback in real time. And I think that's one of the things that separates me, from some of the other libertarians I'm running against, just how busy my campaign has been. But honestly, from a lot of the other candidates, like a lot of the other candidates who are on stage with me in Free and Equal have not traveled as much. One of somebody I know who submitted a question, he told me later, the question he submitted that didn't get used at Free and Equal was, well, how many states have you actually campaigned in? Like, how many times have you gotten out of your living room and gone out among people and spoken to voters? Like, how many times are you being challenged by voters? Because that happens to me a lot of times. I run into people all the time who are like, you're a libertarian, you're an effing idiot, and here's why. And then I say, well, let's talk about that issue. Let's hash it out. And more often than not, even if they don't come away agreeing with me, they come away saying, okay, you've actually thought about this. You've put some process into your thinking. You have principles that back this stuff up. And I have newfound respect for the libertarian position, even if they don't 100% agree with it. And I think that's actually good. That's a building block towards getting more people into the tent and growing our movement overall. So I think that is an advantage that I have. Maybe it's being the son of a salesperson or somebody who's, was comfortable jumping up on the preacher's pulpit as a kid. But that's just maybe something that I have an advantage of, that's just natural as a communicator. But I think it serves me very well as a candidate.
Absolutely. And you said a lot there. And I want to go explore something before we get into a specific question about student loans and education, which is just a mess in my opinion. Um, when I hear people talk about libertarians, and myself included, because I do follow X, unfortunately, I'm very strategic on X, formerly Twitter. because I tell you, like, I'm scared to put anything on Twitter. I mean, people just trolls on there constantly. People will say anything, and I'm like, that kind of goes against um like what I'm trying to establish here. Like, I'm not interested in any of that crap. But unfortunately, it's part of the toxicity of social media sometimes. But I
Hmm.
want to say I see libertarians always saying stuff like in the Federal Reserve, abolish the IRS, abolish this, abolish that. And I'm saying to myself, is it realistic to just like end all these different like institutions and stuff at the stroke of a pen? Like, where do you stand when it comes to that stuff? Like, how do we maybe approach it to where we get towards that? But I think that scares a lot of people when you say abolish this, abolish that. People are like, how's that even possible?
Well, ideally, we would like to abolish those things. And if I were president, I would, of course, sign or work for anything that tears back the state, even if it's not outright abolishment, though I want to abolish all of these things. But, we'll take two things, for instance, the IRS and the Department of Education. We collected taxes, we funded our government, we had infrastructure, and we had other projects that government undertook. We maintained a military, we maintained courts and law enforcement. We didn't have an IRS for more than 120 years ago. Like before that, we didn't have an IRS.
Mm-hmm.
You know, before the income tax. And then, look to the Department of Education. That's only been around since Jimmy Carter. We've had schools and universities. We have some universities that are actually older than the United States itself. They were established before we were even a nation. They're still around. And so we were able to educate young, people and create a society where we had growth and growth of industry and all these things before we had a Department of Education. In fact, if you look at the test scores and the rates of growth since the Department of Education, we're not keeping up with the rest of the world. So that's not necessarily an answer just to create a federal department. And then I would also add that just because we don't want government to do something doesn't mean we don't think it should be done. Just a lot of these things can be done better through private marketplaces and things like this. I use the FDA as an example. We don't need a centralized group in the government to decide drug safety and efficacy. We could have multiple firms that actually do this and that could advertise themselves as, well, we're the safest and most effective. We're the most transparent. We do this the best. And drug companies will actually be interested in going to these firms and being certified by them. We don't have, I worked at the greenest restaurant in Georgia at one point in time. The state didn't determine that. An individual organization that scored restaurants did that for the purposes of marketing. And we can have similar organizations doing that for all kinds of things. And so just because we want to abolish something at the government level doesn't mean we don't think it's going to get done. It means it's to be better organized outside of the central planning and bureaucracies of government. Let's decentralize and localize a lot of these things back to our neighborhoods and communities. And that's a more effective way to actually address the needs of the diverse needs of all of our neighborhoods and communities as they exist, because we're not a monolith. We're not top down. We're actually very many different communities coming together as one United States. And so the best way to facilitate the needs and the wants of these populations is to decentralize that power away from a central government and more towards free market and privatization.
The Department of Education, I still, and this may be a blind spot, a personal blind spot, but just for me, what's not a blind spot, I guess, for me, when I think of education, healthcare, and stuff like that, I see those things as essential. And I think that those should be covered for every citizen or whatever. This is my personal view. But when I hear the Department of Education like getting rid of that, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm kind of just like I don't know what that is because maybe I haven't explored it enough in my mind. But what would be replaced instead of that? Like what would be the alternative to that if you did decide to get rid of the Department of Education? What
So
what,
what would
what would that
happen
be?
is that regulation would then be put down to the states via the 10th Amendment. There's nothing in the Constitution that grants the federal government the right to regulate education. And so naturally that would fall right under the 10th Amendment, would be released back to the states or to the individual people themselves. And so what you would have is you would have 50 different states deciding how to run the education in their states. Many states across the country are now doing things like funding students and not systems. So instead of funding a centralized school system, tax money is being allocated to each individual student, and the parent and the student can decide where their kids want to go to school. Now, if you're in a place that has great public schools, you'll probably just continue going there. They already have the buildings, the infrastructure, the bus routes, all that stuff. But if you're in a place like Atlanta, where I live, the city of Atlanta school systems were so bad that their teachers got caught cheating on test scores to get extra funding. They were spending more time cheating than educating our kids. Well, if you're a parent in there, you might want to say, hey, I want more options for my kids and have better schools for them to go to. Or let's say your kid's an amazing science or engineering student and you want them to go to a STEM school that specializes in that, or performing arts. They're an amazing singer or artist or creator. You want them to go to a school that's going to facilitate that. Or maybe there's somebody that has educational challenges. There's somebody who suffers from dyslexia and dysgraphia like I did, or they are on the spectrum and they need specialized education that's going to allow them to grow and flourish the most. Well, those schools should be allowed to be there too. And I think if we had a more free marketplace of education, it would help not just parents and students find the best schools that fit for them, but it will also help so many educators who feel trapped in the public school system right now. I speak to a lot of teachers who went to school because they had an awesome teacher growing up and they felt inspired to be a teacher. They go to college, they get out, they get a job in public school, and they're like, what is this bureaucracy and this red tape and this administration? I could do so much better if I could teach it this way, or if I could teach this book as opposed to that book in school. And I think we need to give power back to educators to also determine the best way to educate students and let parents use the marketplace to find what works the best for them. What doesn't work well will fall off very quickly, and those best practices will be adopted. But we never get to that real competition and seeing what works best if we're top down. And that's why we have to eliminate this centralization of power in Washington, D.C., and return it back to the states or to local communities, or at the best, to each and every individual to govern for ourselves.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense there. I'm more receptive to that. That makes sense. Um, my biggest hurdle when it comes to understanding libertarians, and I think it's an economics thing more so than it is maybe I guess a moral issue. I'm an educator. I have a PhD. Like I'm a professor. I think my audience knows this. I'm currently not teaching though. I guess you could say that my YouTube channel is my way of teaching and my portal. So I guess in a way I've been disgruntled enough in academia. Academia is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you don't conform to the ideologies of your coworkers. Like I've noticed that. I've experienced that a lot when I was at UT Knoxville. Lesser when I was in Middle Tennessee State, that wasn't more of an issue, but at UT that was an issue. And the micromanagement, I mean, they micromanage the hell out of you. I mean, like I had 12 years teaching experience already, and then they tell you to do it this way, do it that way, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. Like
Yeah.
it's like, why come I can't do it my way? If the students give me high marks on the reviews, then what's the point of you changing something that's working?
And under this model, they keep funding more and more administration and not more and more teachers and more
Mhm.
classrooms. And this has resulted in, like, my high school when I was a kid, we had four assistant principals, one for each grade, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th. Now in the exact same school, the population of the school has not grown that much. Now they have 8 administrators. They put 4 new administrators on, and administrators get paid a lot of money. They get
Mhm.
paid a lot more money than teachers do. And if you look at like how much a superintendent gets paid or a principal, and I recognize that is a job that needs to be done. We do need administrators as part of a school system, but when you just see how much how much more that side of education has grown in terms of public spending as opposed to teachers and things that are going to help the classroom, this is another reason why I think you should put the power back in the hands of parents, to have more control and to be able to decide for themselves. Because if they see a school, they can go to a school and say, how much are you spending on the classroom? How much are you spending on compensation for your administration? What are you getting out of this? And that competition would increase the ability to have increased productivity and efficiency from our schools. And that'll create more lifelong learners and critical thinkers in our students. I want our kids to learn well. Just because I oppose public education, people will say, you don't want our kids to learn. Of course, I want our kids to learn. I want our kids to learn so they can create a vital and a prospering economy. So that way, when I'm old and retiring, like I'm not having to go back to work at 90 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like I would like to be able to have a younger generation that's well educated and well on their way to being successful and fruitful and doing the best for themselves, selfishly so that I can retire one day and not have to do it, but also because I want to see my nephews and nieces have a world where they can succeed and thrive. Just I have a difference of opinion with people. And I think that's the thing we have to stop doing, is demonizing people. And I will say this, I'm sure there's a lot of well-meaning statists out there. There's a lot of well-meaning people who think the state is the solution. But when you look at the empirical evidence, many times it is not clear as day if you just take any ideological bias away from it. And this is why I feel like liberty and freedom and decentralization is the answer many of the times.
Yes, and that makes a lot of sense. What you just said, like I can get on board with a lot of that. I understand there's always going to be like flaws. I think there's always going to be problems. The issue that I have really with school choice is that, and it may not even be an issue with people proposing school choice, is simply we know that people, if you're in a different zip code, you're under a different set of circumstances a lot of times. And that could be because of the criminal justice system that's absolutely ridiculous. There's just so many interrelated themes. It's just not education. It also is other things, and what happens outside of the child's like life before they even go into the classroom. There's just so much going on. The family doesn't even have proper health care. Like all this stuff, maybe the school system doesn't see it that way. They just see them as just like numbers and figures, and they go into the classroom. But everyone's not coming in under the same set of circumstances. Everyone's like very much distressed before they even go into the class a lot of times.
Yeah.
If it's hard for adults, I know it's going to be hard for kids. And I think that contributes to a lot of the issues with this public versus private, this dichotomy that we have. But I did want to touch on the student loan crisis,
Oh yeah.
which is it really is it's an issue. I'm not going to say there's not an issue. Like I have a lot of student loans to pay back, well over 150,000. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to pay them back in the manner that people want me to. Um, this is where I have a huge ideological difference. Like I'm an educator. I've been an educator for most of my life. Um, and I feel like that should be recognized differently versus someone who may not even be attached to education. Like I'm literally an educator, went to public school all the way from preschool, even into higher education. And I still have to pay that much in student loans. And I understand that I took the loans, I get it. But I understand I'm operating under a different system. But I'm thinking, okay, I didn't pay for education, I guess, when I was in sixth grade. Like, why wasn't that an issue in sixth grade when I was in my middle school? But it becomes an issue when you go to UT Knoxville. It seems like to me that universities are just like for-profit, like money makers now, it seems like.
Well, I empathize with folks like yourself who have a lot of student loan debt on you. In fact, it's why I think I'm the only libertarian candidate who has actually a fleshed out plan to address the student loan crisis. And if and broadly speaking, there's several reasons why higher education is as expensive as it is. First off, because of the government backing student loans, banks are willing to loan money out quite freely. And when they do that, universities see the ability to say, oh, well, we can raise tuitions because they're going to give the money anyways, because it's federally backed. So if they fail, whatever, it's backed by the federal government. And so what I think we actually have to do is get the government out of the student loan business, because it's artificially increasing the price of higher education. So what I would do is ask Congress to give me legislation that does a couple things. One, makes all currently government-backed student loans, that's about 92% of loans right now that are outstanding, make them interest-free as of today. So anytime you pay down, you're paying the principal. You're no longer paying an interest payment. You're paying down the principal. So eventually the hundreds of thousands of dollars can be wiped off your balance sheet, even if you're paying bit by bit by bit. Remove that interest rate. Secondly, no longer have the government be backing new loans. So this will eventually remove the balance sheet off of the hands of government and fully remove it back to the private marketplace. What that will have is that will have banks determining whether loaning money to you for a student loan is worth it. And so they'll say, oh, great, you're going to get an engineering degree, good chance you'll be making six figures, we're happy to loan you that money. But if you're getting a degree in something that has less likelihood of being able to be paid back, they're going to say, well, why are we going to give you this amount of money? Well, that will force institutions of higher learning to do is lower the cost of tuition for those programs. So for things like social work, we need social workers. But if you go into work for social work, you're not going to get paid a lot of money in the long run. You're going into it for the passion of what you're doing. Same a lot with education. And so what they need to do is higher institutions of higher learning need to lower the cost of tuition for those programs to be more in line with the free market. And that is a free market mechanism that will actually push this happening, is banks no longer loaning money out willy-nilly. I also think people should be able to, if they are suffering real hardship, discharge their student loans in bankruptcy, just like any other loan, without the difficulty that we have today. And so, my program is not a giveaway. It does not just say, hey, you took the loan, so now we're just gonna forgive them for you. What it does say is we're changing the terms to be more favorable to you so that you can pay down the principal. We're going to get the government out of the process to use market forces to lower the cost of higher education in the long term. And so that way, hopefully, education becomes more affordable for more people, without, forcing public mandates or fully, public, if you make the idea that everything will be free, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The money comes from somewhere. I would rather it come from an open, transparent marketplace where the degrees that are going to be valued are going to be valued higher. The degrees that are going to be less likely to make money are offered at a lower price, and people are able to go to the school they want to go to and enter into the business they want to enter into based on, I'm going to make a lot of money, or I want to do this it's because it's something I love that might not make a ton of money, but it's more affordable to go to school to do this. And I think that's a real student loan program that could pass Congress. This could pass if we lobbied it to both houses of Congress. We could get something like this done.
I do respect that viewpoint. I do. I disagree with it just because I think it's just from a moral standpoint. I think public education in particular should be, I guess, free or whatever that resembles. But it makes sense. Like, I totally understand why people, wouldn't be on board with it. And, I can't make people change their minds about that or whatever. But I definitely respect that viewpoint, and that you took the time to at least address that student loan issue more so than a lot of candidates running in the field, because it wasn't just, you just wrote it off. Like, you put a lot of consideration into it. And so I respect that a lot. I was thinking about, trying to think, what was my thought? I had something there. It had to do with the student loans, education, but maybe it had come back into my mind. Let's talk a little bit about your economic policy. Um, you talked about inflation earlier. What's the current level of inflation now in the States? Who knows? I mean, it seems like every day there's just extra, just bills just piling on, and just the Federal Reserve, it seems like they can just all of a sudden just adjust the rates at just a whim. And I don't know exactly what goes into all that stuff. It sounds complicated, and it sounds corrupt. I'll just put it that way. Without me really knowing exactly what's going on, it doesn't make sense that someone can just turn this switch on and be like, okay, the rate is going to be this today. But how do we address the economic, just like the loss of the US dollar is just really sad to see, the state of the US dollar right now compared to what my parents were able to get when they were kids, and versus now, it shouldn't be that much of a difference. How do we change that?
Well, we first start that by stopping the printing press. We are printing trillions of dollars out of thin air to cover the debts and deficits of the United States. And in doing so, we're devaluing the dollar through inflation. And you're right, inflation is a hidden tax that hits you whether the money is in your pocket, your business, or your bank account. It doesn't matter where that money is, inflation hits it. And it's wrong that the government basically artificially inflates the dollar in this way. Then it starts with getting back to sound monetary policy, removing ourselves from the Fed and what they've been doing, and getting ourselves back to a currency that's actually backed by something, whether it be gold or silver. And of course, I also support completely separating currency from the state via things like Bitcoin and removing ourselves from the monetary policy of the Fed. But this is why libertarians want to end the Federal Reserve. And actually, it was kind of crazy to hear even socialists and Greens agreeing with us to call for an end to the Federal Reserve. It's nice to hear. We welcome you guys on board. We've been fighting that fight for 50 years now. And if you guys are getting on board, we welcome you to join the End the Fed fight. But you're right. It's wrong that we basically have a cartel of financial elites who basically loan money out. They decide to give money to the banks. The banks then loan it out to us with interest. And by the time the money gets to us, it is worth far less, and it is artificially inflated. And we need to return ourselves back to sound monetary policy immediately. But the quickest way we can stop printing trillions of dollars out of thin air is to submit a balanced budget and pass a balanced budget. And if I were elected president, if the budget is not balanced, it will be vetoed by me. There's lots of areas that we need to cut to get ourselves there, but it's not impossible. And in fact, the last time we had a balanced budget was under President Clinton, and it was also the time we had the largest growth and expansion of the middle class that we've ever seen. Is when we were cutting deficits and getting ourselves to deficit neutral and actually surplus. And I think we need to return our governance back to that. Each and every American household has to balance their budget. We need to start balancing ours, and then we need to start paying down the debt. And that shouldn't come from increased taxation on citizens. I say, if you're in debt, what do? You sell off your assets. Well, we have lots of federal land we can start selling off piece by piece. And as we do that, we can earmark that towards directly paying down the debt so the United States government can pay down what it owes when we can get ourselves when we're not taxing ourselves, and at least not in the immediate, towards paying down the debt. We can provide that relief to the taxpayer and foist that upon a federal government who needs to be paying their own debt. We don't need to be paying their debt.
Thank you. And something you said is really important. The whole idea of the socialism, these terms get thrown around a lot. And that makes me happy knowing that you kind of recognize that there are lots of people who are on the left that they're in favor of ending the Federal Reserve, for instance. And I think that's a misconception. And I think with more conversations like this, I know a lot of libertarians are pretty much universally in favor of ending the Fed, but a lot of green-minded people are as well. We share a lot of anti-war sentiment, which it saves a lot of money. All these military adventures and stuff. There's a lot of common ground, and I think if we can find that common ground, we can really do ourselves a favor. And I think we're getting there, but we have to get rid of all these terminologies and the labels on either side. Because I know I have a lot of friends who they say bad things about libertarians, and I'm saying to myself, but we agree on 70 to 80% of these other issues. Why are we calling each other names? Like these people are bad people. And so I think that's something that we can change in our lexicon as people, especially for third parties and independents. And maybe that can help down the road with maybe forming coalitions, or at least not attracting people who are undecided back into the duopoly, because they see people arguing outside of the duopoly about things like this when we really have a lot in common, instead of using these terminologies and stuff. I think Mike Termott, I got him to reconsider his stance on the military-industrial complex is like the biggest polluter. And so I think that's why a lot of people who are part of the Green Party are, it's a concern the environment, because the wars are such a big problem when you talk about polluting the environment. So it's not an exaggeration, in my opinion. It's something that's really serious.
Yeah.
So no, we have that common ground. And I think if we're having these conversations like we are today, people will realize like, wow, we have a lot in common with these people.
Yeah. Are there differences? Absolutely. And I'm willing to have peaceful discourse about those differences and to discuss those ideas, one-on-one or in a direct fashion. But when it comes to areas of agreement, we do have to work in single issue coalitions. I'm part of the Stop Cop City Coalition in Atlanta. Let me just say this, as a libertarian, I walk into the room, there's a lot of socialists in the room. We certainly don't agree on economics or on the ability of, capitalism versus socialism or communism, but we're not there to fight that fight there. We're there to fight for police accountability and for justice reform in the city of Atlanta. And that effort, we're going to be allied on that stuff. Now, when it comes to things like when we talk about capitalism and markets, yeah, we're going to oppose each other. I think you can do that in a respectful way with discourse without trying to be an edgelord or certainly without calls for violence. And yeah, and elbows get thrown sometimes in political debates and discourse, but you can still do that in a way that has professionalism. And I think honestly, if you're wanting to push your position, whether it's libertarianism or any other school of thought, the more professional and open to discourse you are, the more likely you're going to get more followers. If you're caustic, acerbic, attacking people, and just merely trying to be the edgiest in the room, you're not really going to grow your brand at all. And so, yeah, there's lots of commonalities amongst different schools of thought along a lot of different things. And I welcome those Greens and socialists to sit down and to discuss economics and see where those divisions are without doing so with a way that, can be calling for violence or, like I said, rude or disgusting. Like, I just don't think that's good for any party. And in particular, I'm a believer of good ideas don't require force. And I also believe that if you can have a sound debate with logic and reason, and you think your side is the best, well, then you should be able to prevail in that kind of open debate. And so I welcome that kind of stuff. I don't try to alienate people. And it's only because I know former socialists who have become hardcore libertarians these days. I know former neocons that have become hardcore libertarians. And if we just write people off initially and just say, well, they're no good, they're terrible, they're irredeemable, well, then you're going to be a very lonely person. And I just also find that in my personal life. I have plenty of friends across the political spectrum who maybe don't agree with me on everything, but we still have a good time. We still have community and faith and family and friendship. And I think that's important to recognize and to not siphon ourselves into echo chambers.
Yes, well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. So that would be my advice to people because I have quite a level of factions within my audience and that are really into political philosophy and stuff. I know some people aren't at all, but that would be my advice is we really have to stop it. X is where it's the worst. And like I said, I can't control those people, but I think it's really counterproductive. I see so many prominent voices, and I'm just like, why are we going into the name calling? Because then you're really alienating a lot of people who don't really think like that. It's like they have a difference of opinion, but they agree with you on a lot of stuff, and those same people are attacking those people. I think we got to stop that stuff, especially if we're trying to take down the duopoly. We can't afford to be like arguing amongst ourselves. Socialists, libertarians, all people across the board that share a lot of these similar views. Like we can't be doing that to each other. That would be my advice to those people who are involved in that kind of dialogue, which I
Yeah.
think is very counterproductive.
And my advice to folks out there, if you're in a state that, and there's a lot of them out there where the only alternative to Donald Trump and Joe Biden on your ballot is the libertarian. If I'm the nominee, I welcome your vote. I welcome you to come and join this coalition and this movement that is certainly better than what you're getting out of the duopoly. We may have disagreements. We might not agree on everything, but we certainly agree that the two-party system is broken. And so even if your preferred ideology doesn't make the ballot, which happens a lot, the Libertarian Party is likely to be on your ballot in every state. So if you are someone out there who wants something that's an alternative, I hope to be that alternative for you. I hope you can check out the website, like I said, at votechaseoliver.com. You can see things in the platform that you like that are attractive and join our team. You don't have to be a libertarian to do that either. You can join our team of volunteers, or you can become a donor, or supporter, or just stay on the email list if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing. You don't have to be a libertarian to do all that. There's no barrier to entry there. We don't ask for your membership card at the door. And so I welcome your audience to check us out and get involved and see if it's something that they can get behind, particularly if I'm going to be on the ballot in their state.
I tell you what, Chase, I got one final question before we go. And if you have like a final minute to like address the audience, if there's anything else you want to tell them, you can. I just want to say it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. And we hope to have you back on maybe the end of April. If we can get the scheduling right, because everyone that I've gotten this run for public office, especially office of the president, I've interviewed at least twice. And so I think this has been a great conversation. There's more I want to learn about you. And so hopefully we can have that second conversation down the road. But I want to ask you about something that stood out. You mentioned the Ellis Island style immigration policy. Can you tell the audience exactly what that is about? You seem to suggest that we can process these people a lot quicker than what we're doing right now. Like, what would be your version?
Yeah, so I call it an Ellis Island model because I want people to come through that port of entry just like they did through Ellis Island. 4 out of every 10 Americans can trace their lineage back through Ellis Island, the registry room. And yes, I think the United States can do a much better job of processing people to come through without the complexity and the red tape, the bureaucracy of all this stuff. You should be able to come right through, give your name. If you're wanted for extradition, that's a different matter. But if you're here peacefully, you should be able to just come right through and get to work. You should have legal status to work. And if we had this kind of more open system, you would see a lot of the seasonal labor, particularly in agriculture, going back home after harvest season with their pocket full of money that goes way further south of the border than it does here, and that would help to spur market, put market capital into these economies that desperately need it to develop. But also, you would have a lot more just peaceful people being able to come here and get to work, and we could refocus our law enforcement on those who are committing crimes like human trafficking and other things. I went down to the border. I spoke with both people involved in helping people at the border through charity and nonprofit, as well as business owners in the area and residents. And broadly speaking, what they would like to see is these people have some sort of status to work, because these business owners I speak to, they say, I would hire some of these people at my job, at my restaurant, if I could, but I can't because they have no status to work. They have to wait for their asylum court date. And I think we need to just massively simplify the process of allowing people to come here and work and become immigrants to come to this country. And really, ultimately, I would like to streamline the process to become a citizen, because I don't fear immigrants coming to this country. It's not I don't fear the great replacement, all that crap that you get thrown out. No, immigrants would just become part of our patchwork quilt of the American population that we already have. Diversity is a strength of our nation. I want to facilitate that by having as much free and open immigration as possible. And I would do that with an Ellis Island model.
Well, Mr. Chase Oliver, like I was saying before, I've really enjoyed this conversation genuinely. And I can't wait to have you back on. Like, there's a lot more we could discuss. But we do have some time constraints today. Um, we have a lot of beautiful guests coming on down the road, and just I've been so proud and so happy with where the forum has gone, from where it started to where it is right now. We've had so many different types of people on, professors, activists, politicians, everyday people. We really get anyone on this show. You never know who's going to be on the show. And that's kind of the point. Kind of keep an open mind. Um, we're looking for you just to expand your mind a little bit. It doesn't cost you a dime. You can't unthink free thought. And consider giving us a subscription for free if you like the content. You don't have to agree with everything that we say, but we really are about open dialogue, discourse. We don't want to judge people. We don't say bad things about people really on this show. And we believe that people have the potential to change and to grow together. We really spend the time to talk across ideological divides, which to me, there aren't really divides if you don't make them divides, there aren't divides. We're all going to come in with a different set of beliefs and stuff, but that don't mean we can't learn from each other. I want to give Chance like a final minute to, if he want to give any shout outs to anybody. And again, we were so excited to have you on the show when you accepted the invitation, and we can't wait to have you back on.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on if we can make it work with the crazy travel schedule my team's got me on. And as far as shout outs, that's the people I want to shout out. The team that I have, the amazing hundreds of volunteers and our campaign staff that make all this happen. But my name is Chase Oliver. I do want to be the alternative to Donald Trump and Joe Biden on your ballot this November. I do want to fight for the ability for each and every peaceful person to live their life as they see fit, even if it's not the way I live my life or the way other people live their lives. We support maximum free speech, free expression, free rights for all people. And as long as you're living that life in peace, your life is your life, your body is your body, your property is your property, your business is your business, and your family is your family, not anyone else's. And I think we need to all live a little bit more in peace with one another. Like you said, barriers only come up if we make them. But if we can live with each other in peace, we'll have more prosperity. And that's the kind of powerful, positive message that I'm trying to put into our political landscape in 2024, as opposed to the mudslinging, the attacks, and the hatred, hyperpartisanship that we see from the two-party system. Let's break through that static with something that's vastly different, with empathy, with care, and with respect for each and every individual's inherent rights. And if you like this, what you're hearing, you can go to votechaseoliver.com, or you can follow us on social media at Chase for Liberty on all the major platforms.
beautiful people. Again, this is a wonderful episode 101. I knew it was going to be a good episode. And again, I'm so excited to possibly have Chase come back onto the show. I like Chase Oliver. I'm not going to lie. It's not an endorsement because people are like, Kiko, who are you going to endorse? Send me all these messages. Like, come on, you got to be liking somebody. Like, I like people who I bring on the show. What are you talking about? But to be fair, I'm interviewing so many different people. I do have people that I like and gravitate more towards, but I'm not gonna say it right now because I don't think it's fair to everyone else that I'm interviewing. But I definitely like Chase Oliver, no doubt about it. I would consider a vote for Chase Oliver, no doubt about it. But that would be the case for most of the people I brought onto the show.
Yeah.
I urge my audience to really go to your website. You have a beautiful website. I like it a lot. Check
Shout
out
out to my website team.
very concise to the point. I like the bold face. Everything is nice on there. And I guess here we have Tim the Blue Bear tomorrow. That's the VP candidate running under the Green Party, Unicorn Party, alongside Jasmine Sherman, who was also on that stage, the free and equal election stage. That
Standing
was
right next to me.
last week. Yep. And we have so many people coming down the road. We have Jill Stein coming on down the road. We have Mike Chermont coming on again. We have, I think Dr. Shiva's coming on again. We just have Norm Finkelstein is coming back on for a third time. So just so many different people that you couldn't even imagine. And we just want to say, have a great day, beautiful people. And we will talk soon. And Chase, it was wonderful talking to you today. Cheers.
Peace, love, and liberty. Bye.